So that was bodybuilding myths you're tired of hearing.
Ah, yeah. Well, I do have a couple on that one. I
Right,
think,
go for it then. Let's hear it then. So we can dive into this, and this might be the episode.
okay, so what people need to realize is I got my first set of weights at 13 years of age.
Yeah.
I'm now I'm in my 46th year. So you can do the math, get people's brains working there. I bar from 17 till 20, where I was traveling through Europe on my own. Um, I trained sporadically during that phase, but all other phases from 13 to 17, I trained 3 to 5 days per week. From 2001, after the accident, I've trained every single week since. I've never had longer than 5 days off. So I'm coming from this from a lot of anecdotal experience here. So whenever people who are in their 20s say what built the muscle keeps the muscle,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time they're referencing going from off-season gaining phases. That's where they're building the muscle,
Mm-hmm.
and they go into deficit phases. They're selling this idea that you have to still match your logbook that you did in the off-season, which I know through experience is just so high risk. There's been an elevation in the status of that concept because social media can be cheesy as so people want to be saying, well, build the muscle keeps the muscle. So if I deadlift 300 kilo in the off season, you have to be doing exactly the same 2 weeks out before a show. And I can also say this from an age perspective. So it's not just isolated to off season into prep phases. What built the muscle for me 20 years ago, I don't need to do a lot of that same stuff now. All I'm looking to do is exploit the main driver of muscle hypertrophy, which people know, mechanical tension, and make sure that you have good, solid quality work with the relevant volume that your body needs. And that also needs to be discussed as you go in from off season into prep phases. So first of all, I said if we list the things that build muscle on one side of the
Mm-hmm.
whiteboard or blackboard, whatever you want to say, and everything that keeps the muscle on the other side. So, and over the top, we can pretty much erase both sides because one, you've got calorie surplus builds muscle. So, what built the muscle keeps the muscle. So, you're literally rubbing that off the board immediately as you go into
Yeah.
that phase. So, then you have to start changing the rules because now you're not no longer in a caloric environment to allow you to build muscle effectively. Second of all, the goal should be with we talked about muscle protein breakdown and muscle MPS MPB muscle
Yeah.
protein
Yeah.
response.
Protein synthesis breakdown. Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever you're in off season, it's very easy to be in a muscle protein synthetic net positive,
Yep. Yeah. Positive nitrogen balance. Yep.
right? Over like in whenever you're going through deficit phases, it's obviously a lot harder because calories are being spared. You're cutting those. So if your
Yep.
volume was the same and your workout was the same and the amount of muscle protein breakdown that you have is the same, but you have inadequate sources to recover that muscle, then you've got a problem. So the first two rules already is we have changed the calorie environment from off season to prep phases. And now we should potentially look at, right, we're not recovering as effectively, so maybe the amount of working volume needs to be decreased in alignment with the new calorie allowance. And finally, it's easier to maintain muscle than it is to build it.
For sure. Yeah.
So for you, yeah, maybe deadlifts did build really strong spinal erectors, really dense spinal erectors. Maybe that's arguable. The only way that you would know that is if you could reverse time and
Yeah. You don't
undo
have. It's an
right
impossible experiment, right?
with your specific genetics. So I deadlifted for 5 years. This is how my back looked in combination
Mm-hmm.
with all my rows and pull downs. The only way that you could do that test is to get a time machine and go back 5 years and start off with the exclusion of those deadlifts to find the actual outcome. Now, what I've seen, you've seen the pictures there of my back. I haven't been able to deadlift for the last 2 years, probably the last 3 years consistently, and my back has massively improved because I've found other exercises that's allowed me to stimulate the spinal erector,
Mm.
as well as keeping the health of the spine. That's allowed me to maintain some form of consistency in my training. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. What built the muscle keeps the muscle. We need to kind of rip that up, or at least needs to be amended. So it's a slightly different strategy for retaining as it is for building.
Okay, I like that, James. That's really, really good. I can come in here and add a few little things on this and talk about my own personal experience as well. So I sent you a message today because you cracked me up at the seminar, but you were you were doing a demonstration of an exercise and you said, right, okay, this is how you do it effectively versus how you might write it down in your logbook. And then you said your logbook is a lie.
Yeah,
And I thought that was brilliant. So I just messaged that to you today. And it's so, so true. It's so, so true. So the first thing is like, look, building new muscle tissue versus maintaining muscle tissue. The research seems to be quite clear on this, just in terms of total number of sets. So there are some nuances between the number of sets or the total amount of volume you need to build muscle mass. Maybe some muscle groups need between 12 to 18 sets. Some might need slightly less than that. But certainly the training studies have kind of shown that actually just to maintain the muscle mass, much, much less. Much, much less. So just that idea that what builds the muscle maintains the muscle isn't true.
yeah,
Just purely based on that concept alone. And I know we're talking about volume here rather than exercise selection. But if you can equate that first sort of thing, then you can see that there are holes in the logic. Also, I think we need to move away from or rather, this is just a general problem with social media and training and news and stuff in general, which is this idea of black and white thinking
yeah,
that things are absolutely this camp or it's absolutely that camp. And a lot of the time, people are trying to sell you something, or they're making a whole bunch of noise because they know that that's their method or their strategy or whatever, and that's going to get them attention. And look, there's nothing wrong with having a method or a training system or things like that, and it can be successful, but there's just so many degrees of nuance in this. And what you touch upon there is like how you trained when you first started compared to where you've got to now. You can't train the same way all of the time, right? Because things just change over time. You get injuries, you um, find more effective ways of doing things from there. So you maybe find better ways of maintaining the muscle than you did before. Um, there was a move, I think, and it's still popular amongst American coaches, which kind of are really interested in managing fatigue around contest prep. So rather than training exactly the same way as you did in the off season, then what you maybe do is actually you reduce the total amount of volume that you're doing and you try and stay as fresh as you can and you let the diet do the work. And that was a concept that people used to always say to me when I first
yeah,
started. It's like, let the diet do the work. Don't use weights to try and use them as cardio, for example, and you do all this high rep style of training. Now, I think that movement kind of went a little bit too far because they were really interested in deloading and things like that when it wasn't necessary to do deloading. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept of deloading, that was maybe moving from training at say 80 to 90% of your one rep max to 1 week you do 60% of your one rep max from there, and then you can go back in the previous week, and that offsets any fatigue accumulation or etc. that you're going to get. So I think they went a little bit too far in one direction because you still need to have a calorie burn associated with doing your training sessions with your dieting. But no, I'm with you. I think what builds the muscle keeps the muscle. I don't think it's true, and I think it's a fallacy, and there's risk associated it. Me trying to do a 300 kilogram deadlift, well, I never ever did one, so I'd be lying and talking about that. But on 9% body fat, I'd just be storing up injuries. So it's just not sensible, and that's certainly how I hurt myself. So I just echo your sentiment, and I thought that was some nice value add on there. Tell
I,
me some more though, James,
while
or anything on that.
like whenever we're talking about like volume, one of the analogies I try to explain to people is it depends on how skilled that you've become. Like
Yeah, that's true. That's
so,
so true.
so whenever I like, if you can sort of consider how many darts does a beginner dart player need in order to get 180,
Yeah.
they're probably going to need more sets to accumulate the same overall level of stimulus
Well,
because
I played darts with you, James, and I think I threw at least the 500 darts. I never even got fucking close to a
easy.
top 20, right?
Yeah,
You're an absolute ringer, right?
you had
But yeah.
you had your glasses off and you were actually throwing it against another wall. So,
I was shite at darts.
so that's the same analogy. Whenever somebody is highly skilled, they may only need three darts to hit 180. And that's the point. Whenever we're going in, and if we could quantify, if mechanical tension is the main driver of hypertrophy, we can also assume that mechanical tension is the main driver for muscle retention during deficit phases.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if,
I get
if
that.
so, if we could quantify the total amount of mechanical tension and actually literally put a number on it for the duration of a 10 rep set, then and say the most amount of mechanical tension that you can incur during that 10 rep set is 100 out of 100,
Yeah,
then somebody who is inaccurate or unaware of those is probably running at around a 20%. So they would
yeah,
essentially need five times the amount of activity in order
yeah,
to achieve the same quantifiable or equate the same
yeah,
quantifiable level of mechanical total tension.
100%,
So
100%.
I think whenever you're highly skilled, you probably need less than you think in order to retain the tissue that you have built.
Yeah, I think that's so great. I talk about this all the time when I say people use a lot of advanced training techniques and it's like smashing a walnut with a sledgehammer.
Mhm.
I don't do a lot of advanced training techniques, and I haven't for like the last 10 years. I throw them in here and there. And when we're talking advanced training techniques, we're talking drop sets, supersets, cluster sets, things like that. And uh, and I think that's because when I do just straight sets, I can effectively stimulate without the need to come in over the top and throw in a full bunch of intensifiers because people are not exercising effectively. And look, you can go into any gym up and down the country and watch people doing drop sets and supersets and things like that. But to start with, their sets are poor quality and everything and they're not probably stimulating. And that was Dorian Yates' big thing, wasn't it? High
Yeah,
intensity training, which was he was aiming for, look, I can get more out of less because I'm more efficient and more effective with my training. And maybe there's an argument for that's the way you need to train when you do um, contest prep, you modify it. And by the way, James, you could measure some of this stuff. Like I'm envisaging, we could take blood samples from you, we could take muscle biopsies from you,
yeah,
we could test you after 3 sets compared to a beginner and do a control trial, and we could say, look, which molecules are upregulated, which ones are downregulated. Let's see what's happening with the EMG. And he is just much more effective and efficient at recruiting and activating and getting the primary molecules that need to be in place that get upregulated than the other person. Of course, the flip side of it is, and this is tricky, is that because your body doesn't want to just keep adding more and more muscle forever, a lot of those molecules are also downregulated quite quickly as well in advanced trainers as well. But that's just an interesting academic side. Tell me some more bodybuilding myths because I'm quite interested to pull this, Fred, because this is good. So
mm,
we just talked about there matching your logbook and not needing to necessitate the what builds the muscle keeps the muscle. Right. So what else is on your mind?